A couple of months ago, I asked you guys how you would like to see me approach a potential ranking of the top battles in the Arrancar Arc. Now, considering the Arrancar Arc is Bleach's longest storyline and features an absolute ton of awesome fights, I wanted to make sure I did it justice, and it seems like you agreed with me. Over 70% of 5,000 voters on that poll wanted me to look at this arc by splitting it up into individual sub-arcs. The Arrancar Invasion, the Hueco Mundo arc, and then the fake Karakura Town battle, and rank the top 10 fights within each of those before coming together at the end to do an ultimate top 10 ranking of Arrancar Arc battles. That's exactly what we're going to do. It's a pretty big undertaking, but this is the first in a 4-part series of videos looking at the battles in the Arrancar Arc. Each video will be released after the last one, so there's no waiting around. And in this one, the first video, we're going to be looking at the Arrancar Invasion, so essentially volumes 21 through to 27. If that sounds good to you, make sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all the Bleach content I put out on this channel. Give the video a thumbs up as I really appreciate the support. This video has taken quite a while to make, and it is a pretty big undertaking doing this 4-part video series, so I really hope you enjoy it. And of course, if you want to take that support a step further, you can go and check out the Patreon I have for this channel, where you can support me for as little as £1 a month. £2 a month means you get early access to videos coming out, and I really appreciate the support. It helps me bring content like this to you guys every single week. So the Arrancar Invasion is the start of the Arrancar Arc, and you might be wondering, were there really even 10 fights in this part of the story? And actually there were, although it was quite close and only a few battles were left on the cutting room floor, but I'm pretty happy with the top 10 list for this part of the story. So without further ado, let's kick things off. And of course, before we do get going, if you want to leave your top 10 list in the comments below, I'd absolutely love to read it. I'll be interested to see if you want to keep your particular lists to the individual sub-arcs as well, but if you want to just give me an overall top 10, that's great as well. Starting off the Arrancar Invasion list then with number 10, and we have Renji, Ururu and Jinta versus Il Forte Grands. This is during Grimjo and his fraction's incursion into Karakura Town when they try and take on as many spiritually aware people as they possibly can. And of all of the fraction fights, about half of them don't really get any real spotlight during this fight. Characters like Rangiku fight a guy called Nakim, which is barely even seen. Toshiro has a decent fight against Xiaolong. I think Xiaolong's a cool character, but the fight's not all that special. But I chose this particular fight, Renji versus Il Forte, because it does some interesting things. It's really cool seeing Uru and Jinta actually get involved in a battle for once, and you actually get to see Ururu's kind of Nemu-style Terminator mode, which is really neat, and it kind of elevates this fight above the rest, in my opinion. Il Forte himself is not super interesting. It's kind of cool that he has a connection to Xyloporo later on, but his Resurrection del Toro, I think it's called, is not that interesting. It's just a huge bull, but he does get pretty gory when he impales Ururu on it, and then eventually Renji turns the tables pretty quickly when his Gente Kaijo is activated and he uses his Bankai's Hitotsu Taiho ability to incinerate Il Forte. It's actually a pretty cool end. I love the double-page spread of the 3 Shinigami winning their fights, and Renji's always kind of stood out to me because I love the way you can see Il Forte's silhouette just being obliterated in the background. Actually kind of funny to think about that scene, because Renji must have hit him with Hitotsu Taiho, because Il Forte is kind of running away at that point. As he's getting incinerated, Renji sort of must have turned away to the camera to do a badass finish pose, which I think is kind of funny, but regardless, I do like this fight. I think it brings some interesting elements in by, you know, Jinta even attacks Il Forte with his massive bat thing. It's a decent fight, obviously not the best, but I think it does some cool things. Number 9 on this list is admittedly barely a fight at all, but it's Isshin Kurosaki versus Grand Fisher. And truth be told, this is still such a wow moment for me. Isshin being revealed as a Shinigami is still one of the biggest twists in Bleach to date, and it's so cool that he gets to take on Grand Fisher, the nemesis of the Kurosaki family and the hollow that killed his wife and Ichigo's mother, Masaki. and you are instantly treated to just how much of a badass Isshin actually is. He lectures Grand Fisher on the fact that, most Captain Class Shinigami are capable of reducing the size of their Zanpakuto, or else they'll all be wielding skyscraper-sized blades due to the amount of Reiatsu they have. Grand Fisher's not hearing any of it, so he goes in to attack Isshin, and Isshin cuts him in half in a single move. It's pure manga badassery, and I love the panel of Isshin standing in front of the split-in-half Grand Fisher, the moon visible through his hollow hole, and he says, that's basic Shinigami law, don't come up against me until you've learned that much, boy. And it's such a stereotypical anime defeat, but I absolutely love it. Grand Fisher sort of standing there like, no, this is impossible, as his body just disappears, and it's really, really nice to see that Isshin gets such a badass introduction to his big reveal as being a Shinigami. I love it. Number 8 on the list is also a short one, although this is more of a fight than that last one, but it still is a bit of a beatdown, and that's Shinji Hirako versus Grimmjow. And this was really, again, exciting back in the day, because this was the first time we ever really saw a Vizard fight, and he really does go ham on the Espada. Now, admittedly, Grimmjow does only have one arm at this point in the story, but Shinji takes him to town regardless. Depressingly, it's probably the most impressive Shinji ever looks in the actual canon manga itself, but it is still a very cool fight. It's awesome seeing him bring on his mask and Grimmjow just being like, oh, what the hell's going on here? And then Shinji uses a Sero as well, which is so awesome, and Grimmjow tries to deflect it with his own Sero. There's just really cool stuff going on in this fight. Shinji just absolutely wailing on Grimmjow, and of course, the anime brings out Shinji's musical theme, which just really elevates this whole fight scene, in my opinion. The best thing about this fight is it really got people excited for the Vizards in the future. Really, really cool seeing a Shinigami using a Sero against an Espada, and it was just really awesome seeing Shinji come in to help rescue Ichigo from Grimmjow, who at the time, was wailing on Ichigo because Ichigo had just broken his mask. So it was really, really nice seeing this new ally come in to help save Ichigo. Number 7 on our list is Toshiro Hitsugaya versus Lupi. And really this is technically Toshiro plus Ikkaku plus Yumichika plus Matsumoto, but they don't really do a whole lot. This is very much Toshiro's fight, I would say. And it's interesting because Toshiro kind of underestimates his opponent right at the start. Lupi activates his Resurrection Trepadora, and then he just absolutely annihilates Hitsugaya, but actually, unlike the majority of Hitsugaya fights, I think he plays this one very well. Hitsugaya does go down right at the start of this battle, giving Lupi the advantage over the rest of Hitsugaya's comrades. However, Hitsugaya uses this to bide his time, clearly having faith in his comrades that they can survive for long enough against Lupi to give him the tactical advantage, and of course it does work out perfectly. Lupi suddenly finds a couple of his arms completely frozen, and he realises that Hitsugaya is actually still alive, but unfortunately for him it's too late, and Hitsugaya uses one of my favourite Hyorinmaru abilities, Senen Hyoro, to essentially lock Lupi in a massive cage of ice. And it's just great because I love this fight for Hitsugaya because a lot of the time he is shown as being rash, or, the immaturity of Hitsugaya does come through sometimes, but I really think this fight actually shows how tactical he can be and how powerful Hyorinmaru is when given a chance to really shine, as Lupi can do absolutely nothing from the moment Hitsugaya returns to the battlefield. It also shows off the Arrancar's patented ability to completely underestimate their opponents, and Lupi just leaves Hitsugaya for dead, not knowing if he's alive or not, but assuming he's already won that fight, and it comes back to bite him pretty bad. Of course, Lupi does survive Senen Hyoro, but it doesn't go well for him when he gets back to Wako Mundo. Coming in at number 6, we have Kisuke Urahara versus Yami Largo. And this is also during that same second incursion, during the Toshiro versus Lupi fight, and this is a great one in my opinion because it's the first time we actually get to see Kisuke really in a battle situation. He does show up very briefly at the start of this arc to also take on Yami, but this is the first time Kisuke really gets a chance to show what he can do. And it's really great because you get to see everything that Kisuke can do, running the gamut from his crazy inventions to the powers of Benihime itself to his analytical and amazing intelligence that just gives him such an advantage over almost every enemy. Yami also gets a couple of nice moments, although Yami truly is a massive punching bag for almost the entirety of this entire arc. But it's pretty nice seeing him hit Kisuke in the back with a bala, then using loads of balas to fire them down at the floor. But this fight truly does belong to Kisuke at the end of the day. The inflatable gi guy is such a memorable moment. I love the way he just blows it up in front of Yami. It's such a trolly moment, but it's Kisuke completely embodied in that single instance, which I do absolutely love. But it also shows exactly how Kisuke can change at the flip of a switch from being comical and not too serious to being very serious and very statuesque. And after he uses the inflatable gi guy, Yami then tries to hit him again, and Kisuke's just like, I've already seen those moves, I can counter them, and he just instantly counters Bala, and Yami really isn't able to do anything after that without releasing his Zanpakuto toe. Now, a fun fact about me regarding this fight is that I really thought this battle was leading to Kisuke using his Bankai against Yami at the very end of the Arrancar arc. Now, the reason for that is I really felt that Kubo was building some kind of rivalry between Kisuke and Yami. I don't know why he was, but it felt like he was. Kisuke shows up to fight Yami at the very start of the arc and help out his friends in need. Then he fights him here again and completely humiliates him. And the fight ends, I think, with Yami saying something like, the next time we meet, you're dead. And that would be the third and final battle. And I thought everything was coming together for this to turn out to be true. A lot of the captains are trapped in Hueco Mundo. They need the Garganta. Who knows how to do a Garganta? Kisuke. I thought he was going to show up and have his final showdown with Yami where he would use Bankai. Obviously, that was completely wrong in almost every sense of the word, but I was so convinced that was going to happen based on this fight. But regardless, it's a nice battle and a really cool way to see Kisuke actually in action. Moving now into the top 5 battles of the Arrancar invasion segment of this arc, and we have Ichigo versus White. This fight is one of the best training sequences in the entire series, in my opinion. Ichigo is trying to master his inner hollow, master his Vizard powers. On the outside, he's becoming more and more of a monster as he takes on the Vizards one by one, but inside is where the magic is really happening, and we actually get Ichigo versus White. Now, White has appeared in the Soul Society arc back during the Kenpachi fight, but it's actually this fight, in my opinion, that most people remember him for. This is where the vision of White, as he truly is, came to be for a lot of people. His speech about instinct and the king and his horse all stems from this battle. I love seeing Ichigo and White both using Bankai at the same time. White's massive White Getsuga Tensho just looking incredible against Ichigo, and it's just a really nice and symbolic battle. I love how White turns Ichigo's own Tensa Zangetsu and crumbles it to dust, essentially, but then Ichigo turns the tables on him. There's just great imagery in this battle. When Ichigo stabs him through the stomach, White himself begins to turn into Ichigo's normal Tensa Zangetsu to show that Ichigo is now once again in control of the spirit here. And I love it. And also, this fight does feed some foreshadowing for the big reveal in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, which, major spoilers for the final arc if you don't know already, when it turns out that White is not just Ichigo's hollow, but he is Zangetsu himself. Old Man Zangetsu is something else entirely. And I like this because whether or not Kubo had fully intended for that to be the case, it is nice seeing White constantly reinforce the idea that I am Zangetsu, and Ichigo just doesn't get it. He doesn't buy it for that entire battle, and I love it. And I think definitely the symbolism on show here is probably my favourite training sequence for Ichigo. There's also a really nice cameo from Kenpachi, who we hadn't really seen for a while at this point in the story. Soul Society's not involved too much until the Hueco Mundo stuff, so it was really cool to get that cameo. I think fans probably enjoyed that a lot. Coming in at number 4 on this list is the very first battle in the Arrancar arc involving Espada, and that's Ichigo, Kisuke, and Yoruichi versus Yami and Ulquiorra. And I think this is just completely iconic at this point in time. It seems to me to be a very clear homage to Vegeta and Nappa arriving at the very start of Dragon Ball Z, if I remember rightly. I haven't seen that show in ages, but it definitely seems to be an homage to that, which I think is honestly awesome. But it's really cool seeing basically everyone going toe-to-toe with these Espada invaders. Ichigo cuts off Yami's arm like it's nothing, but then as his inner hollow starts trying to take over, Yami manages to then fight back. And actually, speaking of Yami, this is probably the scariest he has ever been in the series. Like, Kubo makes him full-on genocidal in this first fight. He uses Gonzui to suck out the souls of just about every single innocent person nearby, which is crazy. He backhands Orihime and sends her flying. Orihime doesn't get hurt too often in the series. You know it's serious business when she does. He rips Chad's arm off. Like, Yami is full-on crazy at this point in the battle, but then Yoruichi and Kisuke show up to really save the day, and this is such a great Yoruichi moment specifically. I love the imagery, I love how Kubo depicts her speed. There's one amazing bit where Yami tries to swipe at her, and then the next panel shows her foot on his hand, and then she just absolutely wallops him in the face. And again, Kubo's art is off the charts, showing how injured Yami is during this scuffle. I absolutely love it. But then Yami gets back up, tries to use a Sero to hit Yoruichi, and then Urahara arrives, and it is just a concession of people coming one after the other to take on Yami, which I really like. But it is the ending of this skirmish that was always my favourite bit and really gets you excited for the danger of the Espada. When Kisuke tries to hit Yami with a blast from Benihime, Ulquiorra just arrives, smacks it away with his hand, and it's this really like ominous moment where he just stares them down, and Kisuke's like, oh boy, you know, this guy means business, because Ulquiorra spends the majority of the time, and this carries on for the rest of the series as well, but he spends the majority of the time with his hands in his pockets, and he takes his hand out here to bat Kisuke's attack away. It's really, really cool. I actually love how this is portrayed in the anime as well, because the sounds that Benihime makes are awesome, but it's just really cool having this firework noise being like, and then Ulquiorra hits it, and it's like this like distortion effect. Love the way it's done, but that introductory fight that really shows us just what the Espada can do and how dangerous they are, because Yami's not even using a Zanpakuto Toe at this point. And actually going back through the Arrancar Arc to research for these videos, it's really interesting how much Kubo teases some of these Espada. Yami doesn't use his Zanpakuto Toe like until the end of the arc. He draws it briefly to block Hitsugaya's attack in the next fight after this one, but big deals are made of the fact that the Espada are going to draw their Zanpakuto Toe, and then nothing comes of it a lot of the time. So, but I do love this fight. It's great seeing Yoruichi just absolutely wailing on Yami, and then Ulquiorra coming in at the end to really kind of dispel the notion that they can easily beat these two. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think it's a great way to start the arc. Looking at the top 3 fights of the Arrancar invasion now, and we have another of Grimmjow's Fraction showing up to fight the protectors of Karakura Town with Ikkaku versus Edrad Leones. I kind of remember this fight surprising me back in the day. Ikkaku's never been like my favourite character, he's alright, and he was just going off against a random Fraction. But this fight goes places that you probably would not expect, and it's easily the best Fraction battle, certainly out of this little segment, but honestly, as far as the rest of the Fraction fights go in the entire arc, this is definitely up there. Nice little fun fact for you, Edrad's Volcanica is the very first resurrection we ever see in the series, and what's really cool about this fight, Volcanica itself is not like that crazy looking, it just kind of gives him massive arms that shoot fire out of the shoulders. But I love this fight for the ferocity on display. It's absolutely brutal. I love that you get this really good look at how the 11th Division actually operates. You know, the 11th Division do play a big role in the Soul Society arc, but you get to see the 11th Division from the perspective of an enemy. And actually this fight does what I think Bleach is often quite good at, and that's showing both sides of a battle. And, you know, Edrad feels scared, like he's looking at Ikkaku and he's like, this guy doesn't care if he lives or dies. This guy is fighting for sport. And I love that, and you get to see, in my opinion, this is probably Ikkaku's best fight in the series, I would say. You know, he's actually pretty smart, he swaps between fighting with the scabbard and the katana itself. Ikkaku takes serious damage from Edrad as well, like Edrad's no pushover. One thing I do find weird about this fight that I don't think really jives with continuity is Yumichika's very nonplussed attitude to thinking that Ikkaku is dead at one point. He just calls up the Soul Society and he's like, I think we need a military funeral, Ikkaku's probably dead. Whereas later on we know he freaks out about that sort of thing. So, it's just a product of its time, I think. But obviously the main talking point is Ikkaku using Bankai. The reveal of Ryumon Hozakimaru, the only time we ever see it in the manga, which actually I think is really cool. Thinking about it now, it means that moment stays special. And to me, like I said, although Ikkaku is not my favourite Shinigami, his Bankai is not my favourite Bankai, I do think that this Bankai reveal has all of the stereotypical hallmarks that I love about Bankai reveals. And in many ways, it set the bar for me. And it's, as far as Bleach tropes go, and I love Bleach tropes, you know, part of the reason I'm such a huge Bleach fan is because I love the silliness and the tropiness of the story. And as far as I'm concerned, this Bankai reveal is that in a nutshell. You've got everything. You've got Ikkaku on death's door. You've got him being like, "Oh man, I really didn't want to have to use this," which is such a cool thing to say before using a Bankai. And he's like, "Oh man, I really hope no one can see me." You've got all of the tropes of a Bankai reveal here, and then he uses it, and it does look really great, to be fair. And you have a really awesome finish that in many ways mirrors Ichigo versus Byakuya of all fights, but the two of them clash. Edrad dies. And it's a really awesome battle that I think definitely deserves a top 3 spot in the Arrancar invasion section. Now, you may have guessed already, but as far as the top 2 fights in the Arrancar invasion go, they are the same 2 people competing against one another. And I was thinking to myself, which one do I put at number 1? And in the end of the day, for me, one of them was infinitely more impactful than the other. So, coming in at number 2 on this list, we have Ichigo versus Grimmjow Round 2. Now, this is where Grimmjow has lost an arm, Ichigo has gained some control over his hollow powers, and the fight feels very different to their first encounter. There's already a bit of begrudging respect between the two of them. You can tell they've probably both been looking forward to this moment. And the fight is pretty good. It's really cool seeing Ichigo completely dominating Grimmjow after being dominated the first time they fought, using his hollow powers to great effect. It's really great seeing these iconic shots of him drawing his mask, Grimmjow being like terrified about what's going on. And Ichigo does just completely destroy him, you know, smacking him back and forth, using Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo himself being really cool, being like, I don't have time to explain to you how I've managed to do this, because technically he can only use his mask for, 11 seconds, I think, even though this fight definitely goes on for longer than that. But we'll forgive it, because it's all really cool. And then you do get that moment of hubris when Ichigo thinks he's about to win, his mask just explodes, and then Grimmjow begins to get the upper hand again. And yeah, it's just really cool stuff. I love seeing Ichigo just annihilating Grimmjow. In my opinion, at least as far as the manga goes, so many of the iconic Ichigo shots come from this fight. Like, you know, that initial moment when all the Black Reiatsu rises up around him, that is iconic. And yeah, it's just really cool seeing Grimmjow kind of get his ass handed to him after being so powerful and smug the first time they fought. The reason it's not number 1 is because I don't think it is all that impactful, at least in comparison to what is number 1, just because we've kind of seen it all before. So we may as well get on to the number 1 pick. Again, my opinion, but what I believe to be the best fight in the Arrancar invasion section of this arc. And so number 1 is Ichigo versus Grimmjow Round 1. And in my opinion, this takes that initial conflict between Ichigo, Kisuke, Yoruichi, Yami, and Ulquiorra and dials it up to 11 for how dangerous the Espada actually seem. Grimmjow takes out Rukia in a single hit, and this is after she has one-shot D-Roy as well, by the way, so she's obviously no pushover, but he just wipes her out, and then he just goes to town on Ichigo. And Ichigo is using Bankai, but just getting completely dominated by Grimmjow. And it's a pretty cool fight, because it's not like Ichigo isn't trying. He does some cool moves, he appears behind Grimmjow at one point, using his speed to try and get the better of him. But Grimmjow just does things like catching Ichigo's Tensa Zangetsu in his hand, and just completely wailing on him. I remember the anime, like, I think I've mentioned this before, but the anime version of this fight has stuck with me for so long as being one of my earliest memories as a Bleach fan, my jumping on point. In some respects. I just remember it so well. I remember the music, emergence of the Haunted, while Grimjo's like dancing in midair and like just completely overwhelming Ichigo. And it's the perfect, in my opinion, the perfect introduction for these new bad guys. Like I said, they've been teased with the big first skirmish, but this is where you get a one-on-one fight that really shows how dangerous they are. And I love that. And I think in many ways, this fight probably set unrealistic expectations for the rest of the Espada. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of the battles from this part of the story have done, I think. But that doesn't stop it from being fantastic. But it's also good because it's not a complete wash for Ichigo. He's obviously not mentally in the best place when this fight happens, and that's why he's getting so badly beaten up, for a lot of the reason anyway. But I like that he gets control enough towards the end of the battle where he just hits Grimjo with a massive Getsuga that leaves like this really painful looking burn all over Grimjo's body. So it's not a total wash for Ichigo, which I really do enjoy, and that begins their budding rivalry. This is the start of their nascent relationship, and I think it's done really, really well until Grimjo is obviously called away by Tozen. So that, in my opinion, is the best fight from the Arrancar invasion section of this arc. I think it just does a great job at telling the reader these guys are scary, they are dangerous, and Ichigo may have met his match. Which is why I put it above the second round, because I don't think the second one is quite as impactful as this one. And yeah, for me, it holds a lot of memories as well, which I think is also personally why it is so important to me. But that's it for this top 10 video, part 1 of my huge 4-part series looking at the Arrancar Arc's fights. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with my list at all. Do you agree with any of these placements? And I'd love to know your lists in the comments below for your favourite fights from the Arrancar invasion section of this huge Bleach story arc. Alright guys, but if you enjoyed the video, do leave me a thumbs up because it really does help with exposure on the channel. Like I said, let me know in the comments below yours, and also head on over to Patreon if you're interested in supporting me a little bit further and helping me continue to live out my dream and make Bleach content for you. I'd really appreciate it. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.